The French Wars of Religion, 1562 to 1598. By Zaharie Stoimenov, Alexander Nechayev, and Asen Peshev from 1007. The period in European history after the thriving Renaissance was characterized with incredible bloodshed. The result of the Reformation and the Counter-Reformation in Europe was an immense separation in the continent's population. War spread throughout all of Europe. In France, these wars became known as the French Religious Wars. Protestantism came late to France. Only after Calvin settled in Geneva in 1536 did Calvinist ideas start spreading into the country. As a result, by 1560, nearly 10% of the French population had become Protestant. Calvin's influence most easily spread throughout the urban society in large provincial towns in southern and western France. These French followers of Calvin came to be known as the Huguenots. The death of France's ruler at the time, Henry II of the Valois, created even more hustle and bustle throughout society. The rapid spread of Calvinism and the death of Henry II were the two factors at the heart of the future civil wars. What Henry had left behind was his widow, Catherine de' Medici, his 3 daughters, and 4 sons, Francis II, Charles IX, Henry III, and Francis, Duke of Anjou. Henry II's first son, Francis II, was the next ruler, and he was again from the Valois family. He allowed the Catholic Guise family to take control of the army and the church under the influence of his wife, Mary Stuart, Queen of Scots. The enemies of the Guises with a direct claim to the French throne were the Protestant Bourbons. However, the revelation of a Protestant plot to kill the French king provided the Guises with an opportunity to remove the Bourbons from power. To do so, Duke de Condé, who was Bourbon, was sentenced to death and executed. However, 5 days before that, Francis II died and Guise power evaporated as Charles IX ascended to the throne. Condé's death sentence convinced him that the Guises would stop at nothing to enforce their religion and power. His death sentence was the reason for civil war to break out in 1562. The event that marked the beginning of the First War of Religion took place on March 1st. Duke Francois of Guise massacred 100 Protestants attending a service of worship in a barn in the town of Voissy. Louis de Bourbon, Prince of Condé, called upon the Protestants to take up arms. On March 19, 1563, the Amboise Edict was signed. This peace treaty, like the others that would follow, was not effective enough, and it lasted only 4 years, after which the two sides raised arms again. The First Civil War was followed by another 7 wars, each of them ending with a treaty or an edict which was inefficient for ending the conflict. Through the 8 wars, the Guises fought against the Huguenots. The Guises were supported by Spain, while the Huguenots were supported by Germany and Switzerland. In 1570, Catherine de' Medici, Henry II's wife, tried to end the war by marrying her daughter Margaret with Henry of Navarre. The marriage was to take place in Paris during August 1572, and Huguenot leaders came from all over France to attend the ceremony. The marriage was supposed to bring peace, but the Guises used it as an opportunity to assassinate the Huguenots in Paris. In the night before the St. Bartholomew's Day, on 24th of August, 1572, the Catholics organized a massacre of the Huguenots that eventually spread in the countryside over the next weeks. Nevertheless, Henry of Navarre and many other important Huguenots escaped, so the massacre turned out inefficient. After St. Bartholomew's Day, the Huguenots started to develop a justification for their rebellion. They believed that they were fighting against the king's evil advisors and not the king himself, so they developed the idea that revolt against a monarch who violated civil or divine laws is lawfully correct. As a result, quite a few Catholics now joined the Huguenots to complain against the excess of power of the king and the Guises. So, these two groups now formed the so-called Politiques, led by Francis, Duc d'Anjou, the 4th son of Henry II. The group that opposed the Politiques was the Catholic League, led by Henry I, Duke of Guise. Guise used the League both to defend Catholicism and to overthrow the Valois dynasty. The Catholic League continued the slaughter of Protestants and the horror in cities and towns that was started by St. Bartholomew's Day. After the death of Henry II, the throne had to be succeeded by his sons, and then, if they died without male heirs, the next king had to be Henry of Navarre. The 3 children of Henry and Catherine ascended the throne, but none of them was able to have a son. This caused a civil war between the last heir of Henry II, Henry III, Henry of Navarre, who had to succeed the throne after Henry III, and Henry Guise. The conflict became known as the War of the 3 Henrys. In December 1588, Henry Guise and his brother were killed by Henry III's order during a meeting in the royal bedchamber. After the death of Henry III, Henry of Navarre became king as Henry IV. He was crowned in 1594 after he turned to Catholicism because it was certain that the Huguenot could never rule France. After the long civil war, most of the leading peers on both sides were nearly bankrupt, and Henry IV was willing to pay large cash settlements to all those who would return to their estates and pledge allegiance to him. In 1598, the wars finally ended with the Edict of Nantes, which was signed by the politic Henry IV. The edict granted French Protestants limited toleration to practice their religion. It was not a great satisfaction for either the Huguenots or the Catholics, but it was accepted by everyone, proving to be beneficial for France. The end. And thank you for your attention.